All right, Mr. Jackson, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Wolfe, thank you for joining us again this morning. I'd like to draw your attention to a picture. May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
I'm going to show you. Do you remember seeing that photograph?
Yes,
You were shown this photograph last week, is that right?
correct,
By Mr. Brennan, correct?
correct.
Do you recognize the photo as the same photo that you were shown last week?
Yes,
Under questioning by Mr. Brennan?
yes.
And what does that appear to be a photo of, just generally?
It appears to be a photo from the test dummy from the 29 mile per hour impact test.
And does that appear to be a true and accurate photograph of the condition of the dummy following that 29 mile an hour crash test?
Yes,
With the court's permission, I'd like to enter this as next in order, please. If you could hand that to the court order.
Exhibit 218.
Permission to present that, Your Honor?
Yes.
Is this the photograph?
yes.
Dr. Wolfe, first of all, what caused the damage? Well, let's start with the most basics. Which arm is this, left or right?
This is the left arm.
What position was, you called this dummy Rescue Randy, is that right?
Correct,
What
yes.
position generally was Rescue Randy in upon impact during this test?
He was oriented such that the right side of his body and his right arm would be contacted by the vehicle.
What caused the defects in the and the damage to the sweatshirt as we see it here?
That was due to the interaction from the Rescue Randy sliding on the pavement surface to his position of final rest.
Is that sometimes called road rash?
Yes,
Did you see any road rash in any other place on Rescue Randy in this photograph?
doesn't appear so in this photograph, no.
Can we highlight the face? What about there?
Sorry, I thought you were talking specific to the clothing. Yes, as I mentioned on Friday, there were signs of road rash to the body of the dummy itself on the face and on the torso and arms.
Can we zoom in on the sleeve a little bit? Do you see any staining on the sleeve as well as the defects, the holes and the tears?
Yes.
What is that staining from?
Again, just from that sliding contact with the pavement, so it's just likely debris and kind of a film from the pavement surface being deposited onto the material.
With regard to John O'Keefe's sweatshirt that you reviewed photographs of, did you see any other defects other than the right arm and the fact that it was cut off of him medically?
No.
Any other indication or any indication whatsoever of anything that you see consistent with road rash?
No.
Okay, let's go back to the full frame. There's a second image I'd like you to take a look at. If we could have the lights for just a second. Do you recognize what's depicted in that photograph?
Yes.
How do you recognize it?
It is the backside of the test dummy from the 29 mile per hour full-on impact test.
Which arm is featured in that photograph?
That would be the right arm.
Move that into evidence as next in order, Your Honor, with the court's permission.
Okay. Exhibit 219.
Permission to display?
Yes.
Does that appear to be the right arm of Rescue Randy as he's face down?
Yes.
Is that following the impact?
Yes.
Do you see any, were you shown this photograph by Mr. Brennan on cross-examination?
No, I was not.
Can we highlight the right sleeve just a little bit, please? Do you see that defect in the sleeve?
Yes.
Do you also see some artifacts above that defect, above and to the left?
Yes.
Can you tell what those are?
They appear to be fragments from the back window of the test vehicle when it shattered.
Does there appear to be any additional, let's go back to the full frame. Does there appear to be any additional defects on that particular sleeve?
There appears to be some material transfer, likely from the pavement, and also some road rash.
Does that appear to be transfer from the pavement?
I think that might be a shard of glass from the back window.
What was the condition of the back window after this test?
It was completely shattered.
The defect that we're looking at, that large gash, was that from road rash sliding on the pavement?
Yes.
If we can go back to the full frame, please. I'd like to show you an additional photograph. Do you recognize what's depicted in that photograph?
Yes.
What is it?
It is the front side of the test dummy from the 29 mile per hour full-on impact test.
Does that appear to be a true and accurate depiction of the condition of Rescue Randy in that sweatshirt after that 29 mile an hour impact?
Yes.
Move for the admission of that photograph, Your Honor, is next in order.
Okay. Exhibit 220.
Permission to display?
Yes.
Can you describe what we're looking at in this photograph?
This is mainly showing the upper body of the test dummy from the 29 mile an hour impact test, showing the road rash to the front side of the body.
Were you shown this photograph on cross-examination?
No.
What caused the holes in the bodice of the shirt? In other words, the part that covers the chest and the torso.
After the impact, the dummy was projected and sliding on the pavement surface. So again, this is consistent with the front side of the body sliding, making sliding contact with the pavement, creating those abrasions and holes. And again, that asphalt material transfer that you see on the front.
Can you go out back to the full frame, please? Do you see additional road rash? Take a look at his right arm. You see additional road rash on Rescue Randy?
Yes.
On both the fabric and the arm itself?
Correct.
Go back to full frame. And can you see his face as well in this photograph?
Yes.
Are those the chin and nose defects that you saw?
Yes.
Are the defects in the shirt that you see here consistent with the condition of the shirt of John O'Keefe as you saw it in the photographs?
It is inconsistent.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Another photo that I'd like to show you. Do you recognize what's depicted in that photograph?
Yes.
What is that? We can take this down.
It is the rest position of the test dummy after the 29 mile per hour impact test.
Were you shown this on Friday?
No.
Is that a true and accurate depiction of the condition of Rescue Randy just from a different angle after that 29-mile-an-hour impact?
Yes.
Move for the admission of that photograph.
Okay. Exhibit 221.
Permission to display that photograph, Your Honor?
Yes.
Is this an overview of the entire body of Rescue Randy after that impact?
Yes.
Take a look at his torso, the exposed portion of his torso. Do you see road rash on his exposed torso?
Yes.
Do you also see that the road rash that you earlier described on the bodice of the shirt, the front of the shirt?
Yes.
And what about, let's go back to the full frame. Is there also road rash on his jeans?
Yes.
If we could go back to full frame. Have you ever heard a phrase, knocked out of your shoes?
Yes.
Where are the dummy shoes?
They're still on his feet.
And this is at an impact of 29 miles per hour, correct?
Watch the form of the question.
Sure.
Jackson.
What was tell us one more time, what was the speed of this impact?
This was a full-on 29-mile-per-hour impact.
We can take that down. May I approach?
Yes.
Take a look at that photograph and tell me if you recognize what's depicted in it.
Yes.
What is that?
It is the back of the test Lexus after the 29-mile-per-hour impact test.
Is that a true and accurate depiction of the condition of that Lexus following that 29-mile-an-hour impact?
Yes, and I should be more specific. It's post the 29-mile-per-hour impact with the test dummy, not just the arm.
Understood. Thank you. The collision that caused the damage to Rescue Randy that we've just been looking at.
Correct, yes.
Okay. Move for the admission of that photograph, Your Honor.
Okay. Exhibit 222.
Permission to display that?
Yes.
Is this the the photograph that we were just talking about?
Yes,
And this is the condition of the vehicle after that rearward impact with Rescue Randy, correct?
correct.
Did the subject vehicle photographs that you looked at, were those consistent or inconsistent with this photograph?
Those photographs were inconsistent compared to the test.
Was there anything consistent about the shirt that you were shown on Friday, the left sleeve that you were shown on Friday with John O'Keefe's actual sweatshirt?
Was any of that consistent with?
Correct. Was that consistent or inconsistent, now that you've seen all the photographs, with the condition of the shirt that John O'Keefe was wearing on January 29th?
The test clothing was inconsistent compared to that of Mr. John O'Keefe's.
Thank you. You were asked on cross-examination several times about the weight of the Hybrid 3 arm. Do you recall that series of questions?
Yes,
You were asked how much lighter the Hybrid 3 arm was than the static estimate arm, correct?
correct.
I want to make sure we're clear about this. The Hybrid 3 arm is the physical arm that you attached to the ATD and did testing with, correct?
Correct.
The statistical estimate arm is something in the ether, right? It doesn't exist.
Sustained.
How would you describe a statistical estimate arm?
It's probably from taking a sample of the population and getting an average and a high and a low.
Okay. Is that a physical arm? You can touch and feel?
No,
Okay. Do you have any information based on everything that you've reviewed at all about the actual actual weight of John O'Keefe's right arm?
Nothing in terms of a weighed measurement of the arm, no.
Okay. What was the percentage that Mr. Brennan gave you in terms of how much lighter the hybrid 3 arm was than the statistical estimate arm that he gave you?
From what I recall, I think the percentage was 26%.
Did you calculate that yourself, or did you take Mr. Brennan's word for it?
I believe I took his word for it.
Do you recall what the weight of the hybrid 3 arm was exactly?
9.38 pounds.
What is the difference, if you can calculate, what is the difference between what was the statistical estimate arm, the number that Mr. Brennan gave you?
I think I heard him say 11.8, but I also think he said at one point 11.6. So I'm not sure of the kind of the final number he landed on.
Does,
Sustained, just ask the question, and stop striking the end.
does 11.86 sound right?
Yes,
Okay. Let's use 11.86. Do you have a calculator with you?
I do.
With the court's permission, could Dr. Wolfe use a calculator if he needs to?
Yes.
Thank you. What's the difference between 11.86 and 9.38? Just in raw numbers?
You're looking at just the difference between those two?
Subtract
Okay.
9.38.
Yep. 2.48.
Does that mean there's a 2.48 pound differential between the statistical estimate arm, the heavier arm, and the 9.38 arm from the hybrid 3?
Yes, that's the difference in pounds.
All right. How would you calculate how much lighter? What's the proper way to calculate how much lighter, in terms of percentage, the 9.38 arm is?
You would want to do a percent difference calculation.
Divide 2.48 by 11.86?
Sustained, watch the form, Mr. Jackson.
How would you, tell the jurors how you would calculate that percentage difference?
You would subtract the 11.86 minus the 9.38, and then you would divide by the sum of those two and divide by 2, the average of them.
Can you do that calculation?
Yes. Okay.
And what's the number?
23%.
Not 26%?
Sustained.
Is 23% smaller or no, or larger than 26%?
Sustained, let's move on from that, Mr. Jackson.
What is the number that you get if you were to divide 2.48 by 11.86?
0.21.
In percentages?
21%.
Thank you. Was the hybrid 3 arm 21% lighter by that calculation than the 11.86 estimate arm?
Yes.
On cross-examination, Mr. Brennan asked you several questions related to kinetic energy formula, correct?
Correct.
You referenced that, did you reference that formula in some of your answers?
Yes.
May I approach?
Yes.
May I inquire?
Yes.
You're looking at something that's been identified, a document that's been identified as 3 X's, XXX. Do you recognize that? Oh, you're not looking at it.
Not yet.
You see it now.
Yes.
Do you recognize what that is?
It is the formula for kinetic energy.
With that, Your Honor, may we display the formula? We don't have to cut the lights, I think it'll be very obvious.
Yes.
Can we bring the lights back up and see if that's visible? Can you still see that, Dr. Wolfe?
Yes.
Your Honor, is that okay?
Yes.
Great. You said this is the formula for kinetic energy, correct?
Correct.
You were asked a series of questions about whether the weight differential in the hybrid 3-arm would make a significant or material difference in your testing as it pertains to the velocity of the vehicle that you were testing. You remember those questions?
So watch the point and ask it differently.
Just foundationally, were you asked about weight differential of the hybrid 3-arm?
Yes.
Were you also asked about whether it would make a material difference to the testing if you didn't adjust for the velocity?
Sustained.
What were you asked in terms of, what was the question that was posed to you about the weight of the hybrid 3-arm versus the velocity of the testing?
That there would somehow be an influence on, I think, wanting to make a reduction to the velocity of the vehicle.
Does that make mathematical sense to you?
Sustained is to that point.
Would that have a material difference? With the weight of the arm, that 2.48 pounds, would that have a material difference in the testing that you undertook?
No.
Why is that?
Well, to start, that's one of the reasons why we went above and beyond the 24 miles per hour to impart significantly more kinetic energy to the arm. So if you look at that equation, it's a quadratic equation because you're squaring the velocity. So if you double the velocity, you quadruple the amount of kinetic energy. So you get a significant increase in small changes in speed because of that speed differential.
Did you do a test with just the hybrid arm contacting the taillight at 24 miles per hour?
Yes.
Did you also do a test with that hybrid 3-arm contacting the vehicle at 29 miles per hour?
Yes.
I'd like to talk about those two tests, okay? Can you explain to the jurors what they're looking at? I want to start with going from left to right. What does the E sub K mean in that formula?
So that stands for kinetic energy, which is the amount of energy that an object has when it's in motion and has a velocity to it.
What is the 1/2 on the other side of the equal sign?
Just a constant.
And what does the M, as in Mary, stand for?
So that would be the mass, in this case, the mass of the arm.
And what's the V, as in Victor?
That would be the velocity of the arm as it's accelerated.
Why is there an exponent at the top of the V?
Because you're squaring that. So you're basically multiplying the velocity times itself. So it would be velocity times velocity.
Is this a formula that's traditionally used in accident reconstruction?
Yes, it's very common.
Is it sort of one of the foundational formulas?
Sustained.
When did you learn this formula?
Probably back in high school physics.
I'm going to ask you, if you wouldn't mind, to walk the jurors through a calculation dealing with the 24-mile-an-hour test using the 11.86 pound statistical arm as an assumption of the weight of the arm.
Okay.
You
Your Honor,
understand?
may I have a pen and paper to write?
May I approach you, Your Honor?
Yes.
I have a pad here too, if whatever's easiest.
Okay, whatever's easiest. If you assume the mass of 11.86, that's the statistical arm weight, and you assume the V for velocity is 24 in miles per hour. I don't care about the units, doctor. Just assume 11.86 and 24. Can you calculate this quadratic equation?
Yes.
What do you get? I want to do it step by step. What's the result of squaring 24?
So again, you're not concerned about the units?
I do not want to talk about units.
Just, okay.
If you mention the word joules, my head will explode.
That's, I didn't know if you wanted, Newton meters, foot pounds, okay.
Stop it.
So
Immediately.
just 24 squared
Correct.
is 576.
Do you always, in this calculation, do you always use the exponent first? Do you always do the square first?
Sustained.
What's the first thing that you do in solving for this equation?
You would want to square the velocity, but it's ultimately all going to be multiplied. But yes, you would square the velocity, multiply by itself.
What's the next step after you get 576?
Again, assuming we're not concerned about units, you would multiply by the 11.86.
Can you do that for me and tell me the answer?
How many decimal places do you want? Just nearest whole number?
2.
Okay. 6,831.36.
What's the next step once you get that number?
You would multiply by 1/2 or 0.5.
Can you do that for us, please?
That'd be 3,415.68.
What does that represent in terms of the energy into the taillight? I realize that we're not dealing with the proper units, but does that represent anything as it relates to the energy that's imparted on the taillight?
That would be the energy to the arm
Okay,
that's being transferred.
understood. 3,415.68, is that right?
Correct.
And that was at what mile per hour?
24.
Let's move to a different equation.
Okay.
Now I'd like you to presume different numbers.
I don't know what the question is.
Can you do the same calculation using the 9.38 pound arm that you actually used in your testing for the mass?
Yes.
And can you use the velocity of the actual test you did of 29 miles per hour?
Okay. And same thing, not worried about units?
Correct.
Okay.
What's the first thing you do in solving that equation?
So if you square the 29 miles per hour, you will get 841.
What's the next thing you do?
You multiply by 9.38,
What's the number?
7,888.58.
And what's the next thing you do in the equation?
You multiply by 1/2 or 0.5,
And what's that final number?
3,944.29.
That would be the number or the amount of energy imparted on the arm at 29. Is that right? 29 miles per hour?
So ask it differently.
Sure. What is that 3,944.29 number? What does that mean in terms of the kinetic energy?
That would be the kinetic energy that the arm has if it were moving at 29 miles per hour and weighed 9.38 pounds.
One final calculation. What is the percentage difference between 39, 44, 29 and the other test that we just did, or the other calculation, 34, 15, 68?
So in terms of a percent difference, again, when you're subtracting the two and then dividing by the sum divided by 2, so that's basically the average of the sum, it is 14% difference.
Which of the two tests, the two energy equations that you just did, which represents the higher kinetic energy imparted to the arm? The 24 mile an hour test, that's the hypothetical, or the actual test at 29 miles an hour? Which one?
The 29 mile per hour speed with the arm weight of 9.38.
What does that mean, Dr. Wolfe, in terms of the testing that you did with the lighter arm, 9.38 pound arm, at the 29 mile an hour test, as it compares to the hypothetical 24 mile an hour test?
It would be more force and more energy in the 29 mile per hour impact test.
Even though you used a lighter arm? Objection.
Sustains to that.
And what was your opinion and conclusion as it pertained to the subject taillight using the 29 mile an hour test? What was your opinion and conclusion as it pertains to the subject taillight? Was that consistent or inconsistent with the damage that you saw on the 29 mile an hour test?
It was inconsistent.
Thank you, Your Honor. That's all I have.
May I, Your Honor?
Yes.
Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning.
Doctor, did you have a chance to speak to anybody from the defense this weekend
Not over the weekend, no.
after you left here Friday?
On Friday, I let them know that I was returning back home, and then I let them know last night that I had arrived, yes.
Did you receive any new information or have any conversation before you came in today?
No.
Now, when we asked you about weight last week, you did not go into any calculations about the difference between the standard arm, 11.86, and the 9.38, did you?
I don't believe we did, no.
In fact, when you testified last week, at the end of the day, you were asked questions by Attorney Jackson about the weight of that arm, correct?
Yes.
And when you were asked about the weight of the arm, Attorney Jackson asked you if you were asked a lot of questions about the difference in the weight of the arm, about 11.8 pounds statistically as it relates to Mr. O'Keefe versus 9.4 pounds. Do you remember him asking you about that?
Yes.
And you were asked whether you were aware whether anybody had measured the weight of John O'Keefe's right arm. And you responded, I'm not aware of that, no. Do you remember that testimony?
Yes.
And then you were asked, when you asked questions about whether or not his arm was 11.8 pounds, are you aware of anybody ever just weighing just his arm? And you said no.
Correct.
And finally, you were asked, what is that based on, 11.8? Where did that come from? Remember what you said?
Yes.
I don't know. Remember you answered Attorney Jackson and you said, I don't know where that came from.
Right, referring to, I don't know what source you pulled that 11.8 from.
And so you were suggesting that that is just a number pulled out of thin air, right?
Sustained.
Was that a surprising estimate, 11.8 to you?
I don't know that it was surprising. I don't know what your source is for it.
Well, when you engage in accident reconstruction, you never just take somebody's limb and sever it and throw it on a scale, do you?
I'm not usually doing that part of the analysis, no.
So when you're relying on body weight and different parts of the body, there is strong statistical studies that give you a guide, isn't there?
I would agree with that, yes.
Well, the number's just on the thin air. If you're doing a study and you have to figure out damage to an arm or a foot or a leg, and you have to come to an estimated value or weight, you have to get that information from somewhere, don't you?
I would agree, yes.
So you just make it up out of thin air. You have to find a resource, a reliable, vetted resource. True?
I would agree.
And that's what you do.
In some instances, yes.
Well, in this case, you chose an arm that was 9.38 pounds. Where did you get the support that the 216-pound, 6'1" man would have an arm that weighs 9.38 pounds? Where did you get that from?
Well, it's conservative from the standpoint, if you think about one of the equations we talked about last week, force is equal to mass times acceleration. So if we take the acceleration data from our test and we multiply it by a lighter mass, the 9.38 pounds, it's less force to the arm. So now if you want to increase the mass of the arm, you're now talking about a greater net force to the arm. So it's conservative from a force perspective.
Put aside your story about the force perspective. My specific question is,
So it's sustained, ask the question differently.
I'll ask you again, Doctor. Tell us where you got the 9.38 pound value from when considering a 6'1", 216-pound man. Where did you get that from so you could be statistically accurate?
It is the mass of the hybrid 3-arm. We saw the photograph that depicted the weight. Again, how you account for that when you're doing the force calculations is you would utilize the acceleration data that we measured, and then you would apply a different mass, in this case, a heavier arm. And I will note, it's the same thing that Dr. Welcher did in his drop test with the hybrid 3 head. He ultimately measured the acceleration of the head, and then to calculate the force, he adjusted the mass of according to Mr. John O'Keefe's mass of his head.
So for the third time, I'm going to ask you just a very simple question. Dumb it down for me if you can, okay, Doctor? Where did you get the source to legitimize using a 9.38 pound arm for a person that's 6'1", 216 pounds? Where is your source to say that arm is validated to use for that size man? Where is that?
Again, it's the weight of the ATD arm. That is what the 50th percentile arm weighs. As I mentioned, in our field, it's accepted to utilize the acceleration data, and then you adjust the force based upon an increase in mass.
Is that your answer?
Yes.
Mr. O'Keefe's body weight and size does not put him in the 50th percentile like the 9.38 arm. He's closer to the 95 percentile, isn't that fair to say?
Correct.
And there is, in fact, a 95 percentile crash test dummy, isn't there?
There is, yes.
Yeah. You chose the 50th percentile, which is shorter, yes?
Correct.
Weighs less, yes?
Correct.
And the arm weighs less, true?
Correct.
The truth is, you have absolutely no study, no paper, no article that supports using a 9.38 arm for a 216-pound man who's 6'1". You have not one reference or study you can offer us right now, do you?
I don't agree with that, because again, if you look how Dr. Welcher did it, he used the 50th percentile in his drop test with the head, and to calculate the force, he adjusted for Mr. John O'Keefe's mass of the head. Same thing is done in this instance with the lighter arm. We adjust for that in the calculations.
So you have one paper, one study. I know the answer to this, but let me ask. You have one paper, one study to support that it is appropriate to use the 50th percentile 9.38 arm for a person who is 6'1", 216 pounds. I won't ask you again, but if you can answer this once for me. Do you have one paper, one study?
So I'll take out the commentary. Can you answer that question, please?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
You have one paper. Give me a name, an author. One paper, one study that supports using a 9.38 arm, 50th percentile, when you're doing a crash test for somebody who's in the 95th percentile who weighs 216 pounds and is 6'1". One paper, sir.
I don't have a paper because Dr. Rentschler is addressing the forces and the injuries to the arm.
You talked about, however, would you come up with the number 11.8? Like it was something that is curious or foreign to you, right?
Objection.
Sustained.
Are you confused how the number 11.8 would come up?
Objection.
I'm going to allow that.
I'm not confused, I don't know your source for it.
When you do studies, would you agree that the head has a similar weight to the arm and that the weight of an arm would be about 5.48% of a person's body weight?
I'm sure that there's various studies out there that talk about that could be one particular study.
Well, let's talk about one study. What do you think? You're the engineer, you're the expert. When you're weighing an arm by percent, what is the percent of the arm of the total body weight?
I don't know as I sit here today off the top of my head, no.
I'm sorry?
I don't know as I sit here today off the top of my head.
Well, if you don't know the percent of body weight of the arm compared to the whole body, how would you ever come up with a number for the arm?
Well, from the work that I've done with Dr. Rentschler in this case, dating back to last year, it's my understanding that his calculation for the arm was approximately 11 pounds.
So you're relying on somebody else's study? You're doing an independent assessment of the evidence, and you're relying on other people's math? Is that what you're telling us?
I don't agree with that because, as I've mentioned numerous times, Dr. Rentschler and I worked as a team on this case. You can't separate the reconstruction part from the biomechanical part. It's an integral part that works together on it.
Would you agree that the arm is about statistically vetted, that it's 5.48% of the total body weight? Would you agree with that?
It sounds about right, but again, I
Okay.
don't have the percentage off the top of my
So if
head.
you take 5.48% of a 171-pound man, which is the crash test dummy you were using, the 50 percentile, what do you get?
You said 5.48%?
Yeah,
Just over 9 pounds,
okay. Close to 9.38?
9.37.
Okay, now when you have 216 pounds, 5.48%,
11.8.
11.8. Sound about right, doctor?
By that calculation, yes.
Okay. Now, you said you had some confusion where I'd get that number from, this 11.8. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And when I threw out that number, is that the first time you heard of that number?
The 11.8?
Yeah.
Yes.
Or 11, is that the first time you heard of it from anybody, 11 pounds? Is that a new number to you?
I don't understand your question.
Well, you're saying that when Attorney Jackson asked you, where did Brennan get those numbers from? You said, I don't know. Remember that on
Correct.
Friday? Do you know where I got the number 11 pounds from?
11.8
Yeah.
or 11?
11.
As I just mentioned, last year, I believe I testified in a previous proceeding that it was about 11 pounds.
Yes. Your testimony, 11 pounds. Your prior testimony, right?
Yes,
You testified before under oath in this case, didn't you?
correct.
And when you testified under oath, and you were giving a general estimate about the pounds of Mr. O'Keefe's arm, based on your experience and your training, you said it was around 11 pounds. Those are your words, right?
Correct, yes.
Under oath,
Yes.
right? You can't delete something that's under oath, right?
Objection.
Sustained.
And so when you feigned confusion on Friday about this 11 pounds,
Objection.
Sustained.
so when you answered questions last Friday about wherever this 11.8 pounds came from, you weren't so confused about that because you've used 11 pounds before yourself, haven't you?
Yes, but again, I don't know where you got that 11.8 from, so.
Well, we just
but-
did the math, didn't we?
Yes,
Okay. And you used a calculator to help you, didn't you?
I did,
The
yes.
calculator works?
Yes,
Okay. You said you wouldn't calculate the difference, but you did. And so what you just went through this exercise is you divided that difference, that 2.48 pound difference, right?
correct.
And then you divided it by 11.86. Divide 2.48 by, from the 9.38.
Okay,
What percentage do you get?
26.
Would you agree with this statement about whether the arm and body weight, comparing the weight of the head to the arm, would you agree that the head and arm are actually almost identical because your arm, just one of your arms, including the hand, forearm, and upper arm, is about 5% of your total body weight? So for someone who weighs 216 pounds, that's about 10.8 pounds? Would you agree with that?
I didn't do that calculation, so I,
Didn't ask you. I'm asking if you would agree with that.
can you repeat the question, please?
Objection, Your Honor.
So ask the question.
Does the arm weight weigh the same as the head? Or the arm does weigh the same as the head, almost identical, because your arm, just one of the arms, including the hand, forearm, and upper arm, is about 5% of your total body weight. So for someone who weighs 216 pounds, that comes out to about 10.8 pounds. Would you agree with that?
I haven't done the calculation, but if the math checks, then yes.
Okay. Would you agree with this statement? The heavier the object, if it gets hit center mass, that's going to be even greater force, because that is more mass than just 11 pounds. So the acceleration is the same for each body part. It just depends on the weight of the body part and how heavy it is to determine the force that's actually exerted on the body. Do you agree with that?
Objection.
I'm gonna-
Source.
I'm going to allow the question.
Do you agree with that?
Yes, and I think I described that a little bit earlier, is you would increase the mass, you multiply it by the acceleration, that's going to increase your force. Force is equal to mass times acceleration.
Right. So mass has a direct correlation to force. You agree?
Correct.
So therefore, the heavier the object, if it's colliding at the same speed, will create more force than a lighter object. You'd agree with that, wouldn't you?
Correct, more force on the arm, yes.
Right. So weight matters, doesn't it, sir?
Yes,
Force is mass times acceleration. So if the arm weighs the same as the head, you're still going to get the same force. And so inevitably, you change the mass, you change the weight, same speed, it changes the amount of force.
correct, yes.
Yeah, okay. When you did calculations in this case, you never took the estimate of 11 pounds, although it didn't exactly calculate the 5.48. You never took that 11 pounds and determined the percentage difference between the mass in that arm and the mass in a 9.38 pound arm, did you?
No, I did not.
You didn't include it in any of your PowerPoints.
No.
You didn't explain it to the jury that there's a difference and weight matters.
Again, that's something that Dr. Rentschler is going to discuss.
I'm asking you because you testified, you gave opinions, you got a PowerPoint. Did you explain to the jury about the difference in force when there's a change in weight? When you did all your PowerPoint and calculations, did you break it down for them?
Well, I think it was certainly stated. I mean, I know that we went over Newton's second law, force is equal to mass times acceleration, right? So if you increase that mass number, it will increase the force.
When you were putting up your PowerPoints with the speeds, did you explain to us that there's a difference when you changed the mass so that if you used a lighter arm, there would be a difference in force? Did you explain that to us in any of your slides?
I don't know that I explicitly stated it, but again, that's why we went up to 29 miles per hour to account for that difference in weight.
Were you trying to inflate the force for the speed of test so it looked like the collision had to happen at a faster speed to cause a certain amount of damage? Were you doing that intentionally?
No.
You didn't overstate the mass. You didn't use an arm that was 14 pounds that would have created the opposite illusion, right? You used a weight that was lighter than Mr. O'Keefe's estimated arm.
Right, because again, it goes both ways. If you increase the mass of the arm, you increase the force on the arm. So there's going to be more force acting on the arm.
Let's talk about your studies with Mr. O'Keefe's sweatshirt and his arm, and you gave some opinions about what you would expect for damage to his arm. When I asked you on Friday whether you had any support, any vetted journals, learned treatise, any support whatsoever about whether you should use a crash test dummy arm for these types of studies, you didn't have any support on Friday. Do you have any today that you can refer to?
No.
Putting aside the fact that you have absolutely no professional studies or journals to support that you should be using a crash test dummies arm for these type of tests, are you aware of the expert literature in this case that the opposite. You specifically should not use crash test dummies when you're trying to do this type of analysis on clothing and a person's body. Are you aware whether that exists?
I'm not aware of those studies, no.
As a inquisitive engineer, wouldn't you want to know if there was legitimate studies in your work, in your profession, that suggests or states that you should not be using crash test dummies to determine injury to the arm as far as lacerations? Would you want to know that?
I think, again, you're getting confused between my role and Dr. Renfro. Can I finish, please?
No.
Objection.
Okay, so,
No.
no comment, Mr. Brennan. Answer the question, please.
I wasn't addressing the lacerations or the abrasions to the arm, sir.
You had photographs and you were opining that you would have expected or you would not expect there to be abrasions or cuts on that clothing in your test A and B, didn't you?
There were no holes or cuts in the material, no.
I understand, but you offered opinions. Didn't you offer to the jury an opinion that the abrasions on Mr. O'Keefe's arm were inconsistent with your tests in A and B?
The cuts and the holes are inconsistent.
Sir, when you are assessing cuts and holes on clothing, you need to make sure the predicate as a basis that you're using the right properties, right?
I would agree with that.
And so if there was literature directing that you should not use a crash test dummy to assess injury on an arm, would you follow that instruction or would you do it anyways?
Again, you keep saying injury to the arm. I was looking at what happens to the material when it makes contact with the taillight.
A crash test dummy's arm is harder than a human arm, isn't it?
Yes,
You push a human arm, it's like an indent. You can push in, can't you?
yes.
And that property of pushing in, if a cloth is on it, it is easier for a cloth to tear pushing in than if it's hard. Isn't it?
I don't know that I agree with that.
Well, do you disagree with that?
Well, the hybrid arm is a vinyl flesh, so it's not rigid.
Do you disagree with what I just said?
Can you repeat your question?
Sure. Human arm, softer than the hybrid, yes?
Yes,
When you push it, you can push in, much different than the hybrid arm, which is stiffer, yes?
I don't know what you mean by much different, but there will be a difference, yes.
Well, is it a noticeable difference to you if you push a hybrid arm as opposed to a human arm?
Yes,
When you push a human arm, it indents, yes?
correct,
And so if you push with cloth on, the cloth indents, yes?
correct.
Which creates an easier, tear in the fabric with less force if you can push in as opposed to a hard arm. Would you agree or disagree with that?
I would agree with that.
So when you're replicating studies and giving opinions about a person's arm, a real person's arm, using a hybrid arm doesn't seem to be an appropriate standard, does it?
I don't agree with that because, again, when the taillight breaks in the test, the arm is now moving with that taillight. So it's, again, like we talked about on Friday, you'd somehow have to have those fragments accelerating at a greater velocity to penetrate that.
We're going to get to that, but I'm talking about the stiffness. Let's get back to the appropriateness of using a crash test dummy. Now conceding that a human, it pushes different than the crash test dummy, would you agree that a crash test dummy is not an appropriate tool to use when determining tears in clothing on somebody's arm? Would you agree?
I don't think I would agree with that, no.
When you used the crash test dummy in test A and B, that was the 5'9" dummy?
Yes,
When you considered tears to clothing, you bought a new sweatshirt that was similar to Mr. O'Keefe's, an extra large sweatshirt?
don't know if I recall the exact size, but I think one of them might have been extra large.
And then you bought a second one that was medium. So when you used the smaller dummy, you weren't actually using Mr. O'Keefe's size of extra large. You used a medium sweatshirt, yes?
Yes,
Because it was a smaller dummy than the size of Mr. O'Keefe. That's why you needed a smaller sweatshirt, yes?
I think it was more or less just what we could get our hands on.
Well, you had an extra large and a medium. You didn't put the extra large on in tests A and B, did you?
I don't recall off the top of my head what sizes were on each test.
Okay, could we show a picture of A to remind Dr. Wolfe? And while she's pulling that up, is there a difference between, so see that's how that's blue? You see that's medium?
Yes,
So the blue ones that you use for test A and B, correct?
correct,
The smaller crash test dummy than Mr. O'Keefe, the 5'9" crash test dummy, yes?
correct,
And then when you used Randy and brought him into the scene, you used the extra large, the gray one.
correct,
Right, so you used a different one because it was a smaller anatomical doll than the size of Mr. O'Keefe, yes?
We used different sizes. The material blend was the same.
This was new.
Correct,
The extra large you put on Randy was new.
correct.
Did you consider that he wear and tear on Mr. O'Keefe's sweatshirt, the extra large sweatshirt he was wearing that night?
The wear and tear?
Yes, the wear and tear.
No,
Did you ever consider the differences between a brand-new sweatshirt and one that had been worn?
no,
Had you ever had clothing, sweatshirt you used repeatedly, maybe put in the dryer, wears it down? Sometimes you can get holes more easily. Did you do any type of analysis on that whatsoever?
No, I'm gonna allow that.
Any type of analysis whatsoever on the age or whether it's stretched the same, anything like that?
no,
No variables whatsoever on the sweater, did you?
no.
Okay. Does it matter whether or not the sweatshirt is tighter or looser or how it fits the body? Is that any part of your consideration?
No.
Have you ever done testing like this before for clothing?
In terms of impacting a taillight?
Yes.
No.
So this is the first time ever that you've done this type of analysis and offered an opinion in front of a jury on this?
Specific to impacting an arm with a taillight, yes.
Before you decided to come in and give an opinion, did you take any study or look at any journals on fabrics?
No.
Did you consider any of the variables that one would want to consider regarding fabrics before you came in and gave this opinion?
No.
Did it concern you when you were coming in to give a professional opinion about something you've never done before, whether or not you were studied in the area before you did it?
Well, I think I relayed my observations from the test, right? I certainly explained how we set up the arm, how the arm was closed. You all obviously saw the impact testing to the arm, so I'm relaying my observations from the test that we did.
Did it concern you that you were coming in to give an opinion on something you have never done before, and that you did absolutely no study on fabrics or any of other people's analysis on fabrics in cutting? Did that concern you?
No.
So you were comfortable just coming in with no experience in this whatsoever, without even studying or doing any research? You were comfortable to come in and just throw out an opinion?
No, again, and Dr. Rentschler is going to address part of this. Again, we worked as a team, so there's a synergy between the two of us.
Well, putting aside the synergy, you're the one on the stand under oath, yep?
Correct.
You're the one testifying, giving opinions to this jury, yes?
Yes.
You're the one asking them to rely on your experience and training, true?
Correct.
You're the one asking them to rely on your judgment and your effort to be accurate, yes?
Yes.
So when you give the opinion, you have a personal responsibility to support that opinion, putting aside Dr. Welcher or Dr. Rentschler. You have a responsibility for your opinion, don't you?
I would generally agree with that, yes.
Generally?
Yes.
When wouldn't you? When would not be general? Don't you have an obligation every single time you take the stand and give an opinion to be supported, valued, vetted?
Yes,
single time?
and again, Dr. Rentschler is addressing those abrasions and lacerations, which certainly correspond to the material.
But you didn't wait for Dr. Rentschler. You offered a number of opinions to this jury. You personally, under your name, you came in and presented yourself as an expert in this subject. You, didn't you?
Correct.
So putting aside Dr. Rentschler, his opinions, do you stand behind your opinions?
Yes.
Okay. And you do that despite the fact you've done no study, no research, haven't vetted, and have no authority whatsoever?
Yes.
You wrote a report back on February 12, 2024.
Correct.
In February 12, 2024, do you remember talking about injuries to the arm and damage to the taillight?
Generally, yes.
Okay, that's fair. Do you remember writing in a report, it is significant to note that the injuries have been classified as abrasions and analysis of the autopsy photographs indicates minimal bleeding or lacerations of the dermis?
So the report that you're referring to is a joint report authored by myself, Dr. Rentschler, and Mr. Scott Klein. So that would have been a portion drafted by Dr. Rentschler addressing the injuries.
I see. So in this report, it has your name, Dr. Rentschler, and another person, Scott Klein, yes?
Correct.
But in the report, none of you ever differentiate which opinions you're standing behind or somebody else's, right?
Objection.
I'll move on.
The objection sustained.
I'll move on.
The objection sustained.
Did you agree with that?
Objection.
Sustained.
Did you write or endorse these injuries would not result from impact with a non-damaged tail lamp cover and the amount of force required to fracture the tail light cover?
So I'm gonna see you inside.
You were asked questions about impact with the tail light. And in fact, in one of your answers to me today, you talked about after a vehicle collides with a pedestrian, there's continued movement between the vehicle and the pedestrian, isn't there?
Correct.
And so while glass that, or plastic that shatters from a taillight might not impale clothes of the skin, would you agree, if your dummy wasn't restrained, when the Lexus collides with the dummy, there'd be continued contact for some time, extended contact between both the dummy and the taillight?
Well, the arm, as is demonstrated in the test, would be moving at roughly the same velocity as the vehicle.
Yes. And don't you think that the vehicle would continue to drag the arm until the body either was thrown or spun off? Would you agree with that?
At some point, they will separate, yes.
At some point, but before the at some point, what I'm asking is, at the collision, when you see all the taillights shatter, right, wouldn't the Lexus, if it continues at that speed, say 24 miles per hour, for example, it would continue to drag with that dummy's arm longer than is shown in those experiments because the dummy is restrained?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yes. Would you agree that if a Lexus is backed up at 24 miles per hour and hits the dummy's arm and the taillight shatters, if the dummy wasn't restrained and moved regularly, it would extend the contact between that shattered taillight and the dummy's arm? Would you agree with that?
It would move with the vehicle until it got pushed out of the way, just move to the side, yes.
And so what you're saying is it would move with the vehicle but wouldn't touch the vehicle?
Well, in the one test, if you remember, because of the restitution effects, the arm reached a speed of over what the impact speed is. So in some instances, it actually might move at a speed greater than the vehicle.
Fantastic. In some instances, would it move slower and be dragged by the vehicle's broken taillight?
Dragged?
Yeah,
I don't know
so
if
when
I understand.
Drag, push. How about we use the word push? Pushed by the broken taillight. Could that happen?
The arm would move with the taillight until it moves out of the way.
So you're saying it would move with or faster, but never would slow down where it gets pushed by the car?
It's moving with the vehicle, sir. I don't understand your question.
Well, no. You said it moved with the vehicle. Sometimes it moves even faster, suggesting space between the broken taillight and the arm. That's what you're suggesting, right?
Correct.
So it can move with, it can move faster. Can it ever move slower and the vehicle pushes and drags against the arm?
I mean, it might be able to move a few miles per hour if it doesn't have as much of a center of mass hit. but it's still going to move out of the way because it's on a joint.
I understand, but before it moves out of the way, could it be pushed by that broken tail light? That's the simple question I'm asking you. Could it be pushed by the broken tail light?
Just moving adjacent with the taillight, just moving along. Yes.
Would you agree with this? If you have an arm struck at 25 miles per hour, significant more damage that taillight shatters, hits and moves forward into arms, parts of taillight pushed into arm as vehicle pushes forward and pushes arm out of the way. So the word push, would you agree with that general characterization that the broken taillight can, in fact, push the arm? Would you agree with that?
Generally, I guess, again, it would move with the vehicle, the arm together.
Not move with, I'm asking you if you would agree about pushing. Would you agree with that?
As long as we're on the same page about it, it's pushing the arm, but it's with the vehicle. They're moving together. So, but in essence, yes, the arm is being pushed due to the fact that there's a force on it.
And the pushing could have that arm in contact with the broken pieces of a taillight if the taillight broke, correct?
Just moving at a common velocity.
The operative word here is push. And so, do you like to agree with me, or you could disagree with me? Can the broken taillight push the arm so it contacts and provides force against it? Could that happen?
Yes.
When you were showing those photographs today regarding Test F, now you use Randy in Test F, right?
Correct.
How tall is Randy?
He's 6 feet.
And he weighs 200 pounds?
Correct.
So still 16 pounds less than Mr. O'Keefe, yes?
Correct.
And you keep referring to Randy as a crash test dummy. Randy's no dummy, right? He's a mannequin.
He is, but he signifies basically what happens when you have 200 pounds of mass striking the rear of that vehicle.
I don't want to misrepresent Randy. He's not a crash test dummy, is he?
Well, it wasn't used for biofidelic purposes. It was to, again, what happens when you have 200 pounds of mass strike the vehicle.
So when you've been referring to Randy as a crash test dummy, you don't mean to do that. That's a misnomer, isn't it?
I don't know that I agree with that.
So you think that Randy is a crash test dummy? He's a certified, approved crash test dummy.
No, and I think I made it very clear that there is no instrumentation on it, right? And one of the reasons why I mentioned that is those ATD dummies are $150,000, so we're not going to risk impacting it with the Lexus and destroying that.
I can understand the cost analysis for you, but I want to be clear. He's a mannequin. It's used by firefighters and drills pulling a body, dead weight, out of a house to replicate certain scenarios. That's what Randy was made for, yes?
He can be used for those, yes.
Right. He's not a crash test dummy in the parlance of a legitimate, studied crash test dummy, is he?
I don't agree with that because, again, we use that type of dummy in all different types of tests.
There's an H395M PED, which most closely replicates John O'Keefe's size and body, isn't there?
Correct.
You didn't have that when you did the test, did you?
No.
When you do crash tests, you can put a magnetic control on the crash test dummy, so upon impact, it releases and is thrown. You could do that, couldn't you?
That is one way, yes.
Right. So that way you don't have to put the dummy on a forklift, and then it creates a different scenario than real life, correct?
That could be one way that you could do it, yes.
It doesn't impede any roll or drag when the dummy's hit. That's one reason you would do that rather than a forklift, yes?
Correct.
Also, it might show some throw, which could lead to other type of damage like holes in clothes, yes?
Correct.
But you didn't use the magnet, you used a forklift.
Because again, the purpose of the test was to evaluate, we talked a lot about those time frames, right? That 10 millisecond window. It's to look at, from the vehicle damage perspective, what happens to the taillight, right, in that interaction. And then ultimately, what is the acceleration that the arm experiences in that, 10, 15 millisecond window, right? What happens 1 second after, 2 seconds after? Again, that wasn't of concern for me in my analysis.
You didn't use a magnet, you used a forklift, right?
Correct.
And when Randy went for a ride, you didn't expect him to break off the string and slide across the street, did you?
We didn't expect him to.
You didn't expect him to be thrown. You didn't expect the string on the forklift to break and then Randy to go flying. You didn't expect that, did you?
Oh, I certainly expected that.
So you expected a throw with that.
Yes.
And the street has hard concrete and it has a lot of irregularities to it, doesn't it?
It's asphalt, yes.
Yeah. In the photos that you were shown today on redirect examination, did the defense show them to you during your direct examination? Any of those?
No.
Ms. Gilman, can you pull up that last exhibit with Randy on the ground? I think it's exhibit 221. Okay. And so this is Randy, right, doctor?
Yes.
Zoom in a little bit, please. What's that red thing near his shoe?
Appears to be a fragment of the taillight.
Can you zoom out? Could you go back an exhibit to the one before? Could you zoom in? Did you see any taillight fragments on his body or in his clothes?
I can't tell from here.
Could we have the exhibit before, please? Can you tell from here?
Yes.
In finding taillight fragments on the clothes after a collision, that's not unique, is it?
Unique? No,
Yeah.
it's possible.
Well, according to this, it's probable, yes?
In this test, that did occur, yes.
Could we have exhibit 201D, please? Do you know what this is, doctor? Did you see this picture in your analysis?
Don't know if I recall that specific photograph.
Do you know this is taillight shards found in Mr. O'Keefe's clothing?
Objection.
Sustained.
Did you consider this photograph during your analysis before you gave your opinions regarding cuts and tears and lacerations?
No, sir.
Can you take that down, please? When you did your analysis, did you know that a drinking straw was found on the concrete on the street in front of 34 Fairview?
I don't know if it was on the concrete, it might have been on the asphalt, but I do recall a drinking straw, yes.
Did you know that there was a glass found near Mr. O'Keefe? Could you put that up, please, Cindy?
Objection.
Sustained.
Did you talked about cuts and injuries. Did you,
Sustained, it sounds like it's beyond the scope.
very well. When you did test D, did you say the peak acceleration was 780 Gs?
Your Honor, may I refer to my notes?
Yes.
Page 11 of your report.
I think I lost an exhibit. Okay.
Is that what you described it as?
For test D,
Yes.
the acceleration of, we talking about the hand,
Yes.
780 Gs, yes.
780 Gs. Okay. When you did your comparison before you gave your opinions, you showed us a scuff on the exemplar vehicle, photo 77.
Objection.
Beyond the scope, Mr. Brennan.
A few more questions, Dr. Wolfe. You showed us holes in Randy's sweatshirt from Test F. You remember that?
Yes.
And you talked about what you would or wouldn't expect in a collision as far as holes. And did you say something like that was inconsistent with Mr. O'Keefe?
Yes.
That's what you said on redirect, right?
Correct.
Okay. Did you consider whether there were holes in Mr. O'Keefe's sweatshirt separate from the holes in the arm?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yes. When you were making that opinion about consistent or inconsistent, did you ever consider whether there were holes in Mr. O'Keefe's sweatshirt other than the right arm?
Well, I know that there was cutting to the.
May I approach and retrieve the exhibit, Your Honor?
Yes.
Excuse me, sir. Did you ever look at the back of the sweatshirt to see if there was any holes to the back of the sweatshirt other than the right arm when you formed your opinion?
I don't recall.
Take a look at the back. Do you see other holes on the back of Mr. O'Keefe's sweatshirt?
It appears I see one hole.
Let me get a little closer so you can get a better look. I'll direct you to here. Do you see more than one hole in the back of Mr. O'Keefe's sweatshirt?
Yes.
When you were forming your opinions that the collision would be inconsistent to damage to Mr. O'Keefe's sweatshirt, did you consider that Mr. O'Keefe may have fallen or landed on his back?
Well, in looking at those holes, they're inconsistent with road rash. And again, to get those kind of holes, you have to have prolonged sliding contact on a rough surface.
Did you consider that Mr. O'Keefe may have fallen or landed on his back?
Well, if you just fall and land on your back, you're not going to be sliding to get those abrasions and tearing. And again, those are not consistent with road rash.
Didn't ask that question. Did you consider?
Sorry, can you?
Did you consider whether Mr. O'Keefe had fallen or landed on his back?
No.
Did you know about or consider the multiple holes on the back of his sweatshirt when you came and formulated your opinions?
No.
You did no studies whatsoever about the damage to the sweatshirt if he fell or landed on the cold, hard ground and had broken taillight shards in his clothing, did you?
No.
I have no further questions.
Yeah, just a moment, Your Honor. Very good.
If I may, Your Honor, very briefly. You were asked by Mr. Brennan, give me one name, very dramatically, of someone.
Objection.
The objection sustained.
You were asked, give me one name to support using a 50 percentile hybrid 3 in testing forces on a 216-pound man. Do you remember that question?
Yes.
How about the name Judson Welcher? How about that name?
So the objection sustained.
Did Judson Welcher use a 50 percentile hybrid in his drop test?
Objection.
So that's sustained as to form.
What did Judson Welcher use in his drop test?
A hybrid 3 50th percentile male, the same that we use in our testing.
You were also asked whether or not using that hybrid 3-arm with the same speed would have an effect on the force equation, on the force calculation, correct?
Correct.
And you agreed it might have a small effect on the force calculation, correct?
So sustained is to form.
This is just foundational, Your Honor.
Sustained is to form.
How did you answer that question?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Sure. Let me ask it this way. In the 29-mile-an-hour test with the hybrid 3-arm, were you going faster than 24 miles an hour?
Yes.
And what was the calculation again on the increased force that would be exerted on the taillight, on the arm, area of the taillight? 14%?
Yes.
So sustained.
How much, what was the percentage that you calculated? The increase?
14%.
And did you find damage, even with the increase of 14%? Did you find damage on that exemplar taillight consistent with the extensive damage on the subject SUV?
I'll allow it.
No.
Can we have 201D put up one more time? Mr. Brennan just asked you if you made note of these little red pieces, correct?
Correct.
Do you have any idea the size of those pieces? As you sit here.
Not without a scale of some sort, no.
So as you sit here, do you have any idea what the size of those pieces are?
I couldn't tell you as I sit here today, no.
No idea if they're a foot long?
So the objection sustained.
You were asked, when shown this picture, if you accounted for this in terms of damage to the garment, the sweatshirt, right?
Correct.
What if I told you those were,
Objection.
So the objection's sustained. He said he doesn't know the sizes. That's the end of that, Mr. Jackson.
I realize he said he doesn't know, he was
That's
asked questions,
the
Your
end
Honor.
of that, Mr. Jackson.
Do you have the, Mr. Wolfe, do you have the picture of the tin? The TIN, tin, the little round tin? Do you see that tin?
Yes.
Are you aware that all those pieces are inside that tin?
Objection.
Sustained. And jurors disregard that.
Did you ever see this tin in your analysis?
I do recall seeing, yes, in the evidence photographs of all the fragments, yes.
In your experience, are very large pieces or very small pieces put in little tins about 2 inches wide?
Sustained.
You were asked a question about the arm being pushed by the taillight. Asked a bunch of questions about that, right?
Correct.
You indicated, what did you say in terms of the contact by a vehicle pushing an arm?
It's going to move with the vehicle until it separates.
In your testing, how long did it take the hybrid 3-arm to get up to speed of the vehicle in the 24-mile-an-hour test?
About 10 milliseconds.
I'm sorry, say that again, louder.
10 milliseconds.
10 milliseconds, correct?
Correct.
So when you say the arm is being pushed, it's being hit, correct?
The objection sustained and it's struck.
In every one of your tests, every single one of your tests, did any taillight fragment tear a hole in the sleeve of the shirt that you were testing?
No, there was no holes, punctures, fraying, nothing to the material.
Was there ever a defect in that garment in any of that testing other than the road rash that we saw in the 29-mile-an-hour direct impact?
That the only test that showed the holes and the abrasions was that full-on hit where the body was sliding on the ground. There was no test where the taillight caused any type of punctures, holes, or fraying to the material.
And in that test, what happened to the back of the Lexus, the test Lexus?
Destroyed.
Follow-up questions.
Okay, go ahead.
On redirect, you again talked about the impact between an arm and the broken taillight.
Correct, yes.
And I had asked you on cross-examination or recross-examination whether that broken taillight could push the arm, which of course would create force or friction, yes?
Well, once it's moving at a common velocity, I'm just not understanding your question then.
If it's not a common velocity, if the broken taillight is,
So, ask the question.
if the broken taillight is pushing the arm, which would mean the broken taillight is going at a faster speed than the arm, if it pushes the arm, the broken taillight can come in contact with the arm, can it?
It's moving with the arm, sir.
Okay, let me ask you this. Would you agree with this? If you have an arm that's actually struck at 25 miles per hour, you're going to have significantly greater damage, especially if there's a taillight that shatters. So if you have the taillight coming in, it's hitting the arm, it's moving forward into the arm. Do you agree with that?
Objection, about the source.
No,
Dr. Rentschler,
um,
do you agree with that?
Objection.
so I'm going to allow it, strike the source.
Do you agree with that?
I'm sorry, can you repeat?
I can. If you have an arm that's actually struck at 25 miles per hour, you're going to have significantly greater damage, specifically if there's a taillight that shatters, so you have the taillight coming in, it's hitting the arm, and it's moving forward into the arm. Would you agree with that?
Objection.
I'm going to allow it.
In reference to the greater damage, are we talking about damage to the arm?
Do you agree with that phrase?
The best way I can characterize it is it's moving with the arm, sir.
So if that actually caused fracture of the taillight, then parts of the taillight are going to be pushed into the arm and likely embedded into the arm as the vehicle continues forward and pushes the arm out of the way.
Objection.
Do you agree with that?
I'm going to allow it.
No, we need to approach. I need to approach.
I'm going to read this one more time, okay?
Okay.
Would you agree? If you have an arm that's actually struck at 25 miles per hour, you're going to have significantly greater damage, especially if there's a taillight that shatters. So you have the taillight coming in, it's hitting the arm, and it's moving forward into the arm. So if that actually caused fracture of the taillight, then parts of the taillight are going to be pushed into the arm and likely embedded into the arm as the vehicle continues forward and pushes the arm out of the way. Would you agree with that?
Again, my area of expertise is not injuries to the arm, so whether or not those fragments would be embedded or cause any type of damage to the arm, no. But what I would say is that I would agree with the taillight being pushed into the arm. It's going to cause the taillight to fracture, and then the arm will move with the taillight.
When you do a demonstration, isn't this exactly what you see? Could you play E again for me? Isn't this exactly what you see? Play that, please. And now, stop please. If Randy is not restrained by a forklift, he is going to move with the car, correct?
Well, if it's just the arm, his arm's going to get accelerated and move, and then his body will be there still.
And that broken taillight, if Randy is not restrained on a forklift, is going to be pushed, like this says, by the arm, by the broken taillight, isn't it?
It's going to move with the arm.
Thank you.
All right, so jurors, we're going to take a morning recess. We'll see you in about